June 30. We give the treasurer and the comptroller and all the head of finance until November the 1st to get all of our bills in for that year, right? And then, in all this complicated language, what it says is this: any monies received in addition to monies budgeted. Now, why is that important? It's important for this reason. I learned on finance that we budget, say, $100 million to a given group. We expect them to spend no more than $90 million. And they know that. So at the end of the year, we may have $650 million in accounts around. That's our just in case money. You follow me? And in 2007, we spent every penny of it, plus more, plus pull money out of the road funds, which is illegal. But the Democrats did that. But anyway, it was done. And so in case everything turns bad, we got to have a little cushion there. I hope none of us spend our checking accounts down to zero each month. So that money is there. That money stays. We're not getting any of that money. So the money that we're going to take is only above the budgeted amount. If you're overseeing a group and they say $10 million, that $10 million stays in the governor's control. But if we take in $10 million or $1 billion more than we budgeted, we budget 37.5, we take in 38.5, that $1 billion must be set aside. This creates a fund for that money to go into. Until November the 1st, any bills that come in under the budget can be paid out of. Let's assume that it's $1 billion. We think on July 30th, but by the time we get it counted up, it's $900 million. That $900 million is frozen at that time. Notice goes out to the state legislators, and starting in January, the money goes as follows unless redirected. And that'll be an important point that we'll talk about in a few minutes. This was one of the Governor Haslam's greatest concerns. What do we do with that $900 million? Number one, we take $100 million of it and we take it over here and we hand it to Andy. Andy, hold this money in case we need it. The rainy day fund was $264 million behind. It's the biggest it's ever been in Tennessee at $1.1 billion. And Governor Lee put, what, 250 or 300 in it last year? By far the largest contribution ever made to it Governor Lee made in his first year. But there is a state statute that says the rainy day fund must be no less than 8% of Tennessee tax revenues. Are you aware of that? I wasn't. Every year when we vote on the budget, we vote to break that law. Wouldn't you hate somebody to run against you and say you did that? The public wouldn't understand that. So we'll give $100 million to Andy. 25% of the remaining $800,000 goes to that rainy day fund until it reaches its 8%. Now, this year, with the contribution, we're about $210 million behind. If we had $1 billion this year and 25% of it went into it, it would fully fund that for the first time in the history of Tennessee. Next year, if there's a surplus, no money will go into it except what's necessary to get us back up 8%. You following? So once we get it caught up to the 8%, the amounts to keep it at 8% will be very low. Are you with me? So we give $100 million over here for what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Up to 25% goes into the rainy day fund until it reaches 8%, and then that stops. The next expenditure is $55 million. Now, let me tell you why we're doing that. I serve on a board in Chattanooga with the guy that's the road superintendent of Hamilton County. And so one night, we're sitting there waiting for the meeting to start, and he said, Mike, I cannot tell you what that $55 million did to the county. I said, how much of it did Hamilton County get? $1.3 million. Well, goodness, as much as roads cost, that's a drop in the bucket. He said, no, not the way you all sent it to us. Okay. How did we send it to you? You sent it to us that it can only buy materials. What does that mean? He says, my budget for roads, and this is not exact, I'm just doing it so we can figure it quickly, is $6 million a year. Out of that $6 million, I have to pay my workers. I have to buy that new diesel engine for $20,000 exploded in the truck. I've got to buy tires. I got to put brakes on it. I got to pay everything. By the time I get through each year, I have an average of $600,000 to actually put in asphalt and gravels. Wow. That's like, you ever run a church budget? I have, and your church takes in all this money, and when you get through paying all your overhead, you've got a tiny little amount of money over here to actually do something with. That's the way it works now, guys. That's about the way all the budgets work. So he had $600,000. This 1.3 that we sent him could only be spent on materials. It could not be spent on trucks, tires, engineers, plans, fuel, nothing. They paved more roads in Hamilton County with that 1.3 million than they paved in 10 years. People were so happy. Man, where are we getting all this money? Well, we really didn't give them much money. We restricted how it was spent. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, my road that I live on is one of the best roads I've ever seen. It was built about 50 years ago, but for some reason it has just held up. You know, some roads do, some don't. When we had the bad drought last year, that road started coming apart. I mean, it is bad. It's a state road. So I learned that snow and salt is very bad for roads, but droughts are worse because the droughts cause the earth to constrict, and that literally moves the road. And so all of the counties started talking about, we need that money back. Immediately, they started talking about a raise in the gas tax. That had no positive response from anyone I talked to. This gives $100 million for safety, funds, the rainy day fund to 8%, and for a period determined by us, $55 million goes back in that exact same fund under the exact same circumstances. After the 100, that, and the 55, that money is then determined, and let's say that it turns out to be $650 million. How do we get that money back to the people? We don't have a tax return. Now, the original bill, if you remember, reduced the sales tax. Well, Charles Sargent said to me, Mike, we can't do that. Guys like me and you will go buy a new car, and we'll benefit from it. I said, wow, didn't think about that. He said, you're a boater. People will go buy a boat. They're going to save a tremendous amount of money on sales tax. We can't, that's not fair. I said, golly, Charles, you're right. He said, okay, let's put it on sales tax, but let's not let it apply to any purchase over $4,500. We kept talking. We cut that down to $3,500. I'm at Walmart one day, and some lady walks up to me just like you did. I've been following this bill you're running. And she says, why would you do this? Well, ma'am, I think we ought to return the money to the public. She says, then you return it through the food tax. Why didn't I think of that? You know, sometimes I'm just overwhelmed at how stupid I am. And she said, then it was 5.5%. It's now down to 4%. But she said, why wouldn't you reduce the food tax? Everyone buys food. And no one would run out if you only reduce it for 90 days or 180 days. No one's going to go out and buy 2 years worth of food because it won't keep. Reduce the food tax. All right. Our food tax makes about $50 million a month. So that's about $600 million a year. Now, out of that, the cities and the counties get a share of that. So if it's 4%, this bill, if you read it, it's hard to find in there, but trust me, it says it through all the legalese. If it's 4%, and I'm just pulling 1% for Anderson County and 0.75% for Knoxville, your food tax would go to 3% in your county and 75% of 1% in your county. If we have enough money, then we can vote, and knowing these guys, I've got a pretty good idea of what they'd do. It would be totally eliminated, and we would refund that money to you. This bill does not spend your money, it spends state money. It's easy for me to sit up there and tell Knoxville what they need to do, pass the buck, or pass it to Anderson County. That's what they do in Washington. We don't do that. You follow me? So if we have enough budget surplus that we can go to zero on the food tax and keep you whole and keep you whole, then that's what the bill does. If there's not enough money, then it reduces it down to a percent that we will determine. We could eliminate it entirely for 90 days, or we could go to 3% for the entire year.